while you guys get warmed up with plenty of questions, we are going to answer a question from a doctor. Yes, we actually got a doctor that asked us a question. Dr. Mayank Ningam that says, could you please do a car versus bus comparisons with pros and cons for each? We are traveling in late May for honeymoon. All right, so that's a really good question because a lot of people actually are considering traveling New Zealand either by car or by bus, and that's basically your two options. You can't really travel around New Zealand by train. I know a lot of Europeans are often thinking about that because it's such an easy way to travel around Europe. But New Zealand have very limited amount of train rides, and train rides are mostly, let's say, an attraction more than a transportation method. And when it comes to flight, it's not necessarily a favorite of people for traveling New Zealand by air, just because you miss on a lot of the amazing sceneries, and not every single spot that you want to visit has an airport. So it's kind of like in between. So, and there's also the option to travel around New Zealand by ferry, but it's not really the case because there's a few boats around, but that's pretty much it. You will take the ferry anyway if you're traveling by bus or by car, because you have to take the ferry between the Northern End and the Southern End. So, getting rid of all the other one, let's talk about cars and bus. I think we're going to go with like pros and cons for each of them, and we're just going to elaborate a little bit. I think it's the best way for you to choose which one you prefer, just going through the pros and cons. So the first pros for cars is obviously that they are very flexible. Traveling by car is super flexible. You have your own itinerary, you decide where you want to go, and you can go pretty much everywhere. And when I say pretty much everywhere, I mean pretty much everywhere. There are some places that you can't reach by car in New Zealand. You can only go with certain buses or certain tours. For example, when you want to go to Cape Reinga, which is all the way on top of the Northern End, there is a big section that is really fun to do, which is driving on the beach, because the beach is actually the official highway there. There are some other options, but the fun part is to drive on the beach. And you can't do that with rental cars. It's actually out of your terms and conditions of renting your car. So you will only be able to get there by bus and to drive on that beach by bus, except if you buy your own car. But that's a whole different case, and that's definitely not what you want to do for your honeymoon. So by car, you can go pretty much anywhere. You can stop along the way everywhere you want, check out all the waterfall and all the super sites that you want to check out. So it's very flexible. What about bus?
For bus, the obvious main pros of taking the bus is that it's the cheapest type of
Do you want mind doing that? So we do, we compare them.
Okay,
yeah, so flexible, and then yes.
Okay,
cool.
Yep. All right. So on the opposite side, relating to what Robin was saying, with cars being super flexible, with the bus you don't really get that much flexibility in comparison. Obviously, you need to stick to a schedule. The buses run at certain times of the day, which means that you kind of have to sort of plan your itinerary kind of around what time you can get the bus and that sort of thing. So definitely less flexibility when it comes to sticking to a schedule with buses. And also, you don't have as much flexibility when it comes to the locations that you get to visit. Although New Zealand's bus network is very extensive, they go to most towns and cities and villages in New Zealand, and you will be able to get to most places that you want to visit. The buses don't go absolutely everywhere, so you have to sort of, you're only confined to where you can actually get to on the bus route. So less flexibility in terms of the timetables, the schedules, but less flexibility also in terms of where you can get to. Do you want to go on to the next thing?
So the first con for renting a car in New Zealand is that it's pretty expensive. I think it is probably the most expensive method of travel around New Zealand is to rent a car, especially during the high season, which is summer in New Zealand. So summer in New Zealand is December, January, February, and this is when car rental gets really expensive. So You add on top of that the fact that gas in New Zealand is quite expensive. At the moment, it's well over the $2 per liters, which I think makes it about 7 a gallon, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but something like that. So it's quite expensive to run a car around New Zealand, and also it will cost you more money when taking the ferry, for example, because you have to pay for passengers and for the vehicle as well. And if you decide to just travel one way, you usually have a one-way fee, meaning that if you travel from Auckland and drop the car back in Christchurch, there is usually a little bit of a fee. Now, if you want to find some car rentals which don't have one-way fee and save a lot of money on traveling in New Zealand, you can check out NZPocketGuide.com, where we actually list all the car rental company, we give you our opinion on them, and we tell you what they include and what they don't. So it's a really great way to get started with that. And it's written by Laura and I, so we make sure that we put all our knowledge on the website as well. So it's nzpocketguide.com. So one of the main cons is the fact that it's quite expensive.
But yeah, so that leads us on to a pro of taking the bus, which is on the other side, buses are pretty cheap. They are one of the least expensive ways to travel around New Zealand. The price of a bus ticket would be probably cheaper than just the day rates of a car rental. And also you don't have to pay for fuel, which is associated with car rental as well. So all around, it's definitely a lot cheaper to take the bus. And just as an extra bonus to that, it's the more eco-friendly way of traveling around New Zealand. Just less carbon emissions, if that's something that you care about. And I think after traveling around New Zealand and seeing how pretty some of the areas are around New Zealand, it's probably something that you'll want to keep in mind.
And don't want, it's something you should keep in mind anyway. All right, so another con of having a car is that you have to drive on New Zealand roads. New Zealand roads are notoriously kind of windy. They are not perfect by any stretch of the words. And you drive, for most countries, we're driving in New Zealand on the left, so it's the opposite side than what you're used to, so it may be a little bit stressful. Add to that you always need to kind of check where you're going with the GPS and all that. It's not necessarily the most fun experience to actually drive around New Zealand. Depending on how confident you are of the driver, some people are completely fine driving all around, right? But it's not necessarily the most fun ways, and you don't necessarily get to enjoy the view as much as you are focused on so many different things. So the fact that you have to drive for your whole trip and everything just add a bit of a layer of stress, a little bit less enjoyable for the whole trip. So it's usually a con for renting a car in New Zealand. On the flip side of that, if you're taking the bus, you can actually take the time to just enjoy the view. You're not driving, you don't have to drive, obviously, the bus driver's doing that for you, so it's generally a more relaxing experience. You just sit back, look out your window and see the amazing scenery go by, and that's pretty much what the bus experience is about. You don't have to worry about directions either, you can just chill. And quite often they give you commentary, so you get to learn more as traveling by bus, because even sometimes in normal buses like intercity, for example, that goes just from point A to point B, sometimes the bus driver will take the microphone and give a couple of facts, and it's just they just enjoy what they do, and so you get to learn quite a lot. So it's definitely a big pro for bus travel in New Zealand. Going back to car rental, one of the other negative points is that you sometimes get more tired, and driving is not necessarily, as I mentioned, the most relaxing things to do when traveling in a foreign country, and so it usually gets you a little bit more tired. So let's say you're driving a couple of hours, you do an activity, then you have to drive another hour to your accommodation, you have to find parking, sort all those kind of things. It is just a bit of there is a lot to do as well, and it's a little bit more of an exhausting experience to travel by car.
So if you're taking the bus, though, you actually get the time to rest on the bus. You don't have to, like we say, you don't have to drive. You don't have to worry about directions. It's kind of stress-free, and it's a good time and a good opportunity to get some rest or even some extra sleep if you need it. A lot of the activities that you do around New Zealand in themselves can be pretty exhausting depending on what you're doing. For instance, there's lots of hikes, and after doing a long hike maybe the day before, maybe the last thing you want to do is start driving the day after. So just getting some rest on the bus is probably like a really good advantage of taking the bus. So that's really all I've got to say on that one.
All right. So another negative point for having the car, but don't worry, we'll go to more negative point later on, is that you have to find parking. It really doesn't affect your trip very much when you are most places around New Zealand, but when you are around New Zealand's cities like Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, and Queenstown, it is sometimes really dreadful and extremely expensive to find parking. For example, Laura and I went to Auckland about 2 or 3 weeks ago on a trip, and we were staying in Auckland Central, and we actually spent about the same amount of money on parking that we did spend on accommodation in Auckland Central. That's to tell you how high it went. Admittedly, we got an expensive parking and a cheap accommodation, but that's that's usually there is a budget for that, so keep that in mind when traveling around. But I'm going to finish with a positive though for cars, is that it's much more private. You are just you and your loved one, because you're trying to travel with your partner, I guess, for your honeymoon. You're not going with your best friend on the honeymoon, I guess. But so you and your loved one, or just you and your mate, and it's just your experience. You can be as loud as you want, it can be as quiet as you want, you can make the joke that you want, it's pretty much kind of like your own experience. You can play the music that you want. It's pretty much your own road trip experience. So it's a bit in that way, it's kind of a bit more like your trip rather than a social experience.
Yeah, and then compare that to buses. Then you are obviously having a shared space with quite a lot of people on the bus. So if you're on your honeymoon, maybe it feels a little less romantic to be surrounded by tons of people on the bus. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously a personal preference. Some people like to have a bit of more of a private experience, which is definitely what you'll get with a car. But if you're not bothered by just being surrounded by people and just having this own little space of the bus to yourselves and not really having much else, then bus is okay.
and to be fair, I mean, the good thing with buses is that seats are usually 2x2 anyway, so it's gonna be you and your loved one anyway. So it's kind of like, it's not necessarily that massive of a call.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope this will help you make your decision, Mr. Dr. Mayanka Ningam. Thanks for the question. If you do have any follow-up questions, put it in the comments of any of our videos, and we pick them up and answer them like this one every single week at 8 a.m. New Zealand time during our live session. And if you want more information about traveling in New Zealand, check out
NZPocketGuide.com.
NZPocketGuide.com, and like and subscribe to say thank you for all our hard work.